Chicago, it's Startup Hypeman, the podcast. What's up, everyone? My name is Raj Nation, founder and chief pitch artist at Startup Hypeman, where we help startups, scale-ups, and grown-ups not suck at how they pitch themselves so they stand out to their audience and stand apart from the competition. This podcast is all about bringing you the hearts, the minds, and the stories of leaders in the startup ecosystem, talking through the strategies they have deployed in order to build and grow their companies. And it's officially season 17 of the show, and all season long we've got a special treat for you, bringing you guests exclusively from the Startup Hypeman client portfolio, giving you a piece of their journey. Before we begin, if you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And remember, you can catch all the episodes from our 17-season archive and learn how to pitch your startup at startuphypeman.com. All right, get your popcorn ready and get hyped because it's go time.
Ladies and gentlemen, making his way to the microphone from New Jersey and currently residing in San Antonio, Texas, he is the CEO of SearchSpring. Please welcome Peter Mesana.
Woo-hoo, crowd goes wild.
No, you're definitely the heel in this. People are going to start booing you. Welcome, everybody. It is a brand new season of Startup Hypeman, the podcast. And in this season, our entire guest roster coming up this season are all different clients, present and past, in the Startup Hypeman portfolio. So today we're featuring SearchSpring and Peter Mesana, who Startup Hypeman has been working with for over a year now, to what Peter, I hope, would say is better than mixed results. What we're going to talk about today is leading a team through a merger. Quick background on SearchSpring, leading company in the e-commerce space, specifically around shopper experience and making a site easier for shoppers to use and the retailers to have the site do what they actually want it to do. They've been around for over a decade. They're held by a private equity company at this point. And our topic today with Peter, the CEO of SearchSpring, is how to lead a team through a merger. Peter, welcome. Why is this on your mind? Why is it important to you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Mergers, I'm always asked, what's the most difficult thing you do or have done? And if I'm just blindly asked, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? It's always merged two companies. I've done it now twice. Well, two different companies, 3 times with SearchSpring, but a time before. And I've seen a lot of pitfalls, and it's really, really difficult.
We're going to get a whole lot more into that as this conversation progresses. But first, let's learn a little bit more about Peter himself. Now, Peter, you told me before we started recording that you have lived all over the United States throughout your life. I think you said this is your 10th, San Antonio is your 10th or 11th city or state that you have lived in. Texas being the state, obviously San Antonio is not the state. With all of that activity, I'll tell you, I somehow mysteriously, I have never lived more than 25 miles outside of where I was born and where I grew up. And I've got a lot of travel experience, but I've never, I went to college in Chicago. I grew up outside of Chicago, and I've lived in Chicago since. So with all that experience moving around in your life, what do you feel that has taught you about relationship building?
2 things. One is it's really hard to build a relationship, the long-term relationship that's everlasting when you're moving every 2 to 3 years as a child. But it also teaches you how to make friends really quickly and adapt. Adaptability is for sure. I just be dropped into any city and make friends right away, and get a little tougher as I get older. It's way easier when you're little, but yeah. A little bit of a little Gumby, a little flexibility.
Gumby-like relationship building. I like that. How would you say that has then influenced the way you approach business? Not necessarily as a CEO, but obviously you didn't start on day one as a CEO in your career, but how do you feel that has shaped your mindset around business overall?
I think it's kind of the same thing when you're starting at a new company. You gotta come in, you gotta be confident, you gotta learn. Same thing when you move to a new city, it's not exactly the same thing, but it's all about, kind of following a formula in a way. That sounds weird to say, but, joining clubs or groups, it's the same thing as, getting to know your coworkers. I don't think those two are very dissimilar from starting a new job. You go through the same basic things of, nobody, there's some clicks, and there's always some level of clicks at a company.
Mm. Do you think that it is easier then to build relationships quickly if you have moved around? Or do you think there's value to, staying in one place for a long time?
I didn't get to A/B test that, so I don't know. I think I would have rather stayed in one place a long time. It probably would have been easier, but I didn't have a choice.
You went to college at University of Arizona. What did you study there, and did it ultimately impact what you're doing today with your work life?
Absolutely, it did, to answer a short answer. But I studied entrepreneurship, and then I got a second degree in finance. I started out in finance when I graduated, but that didn't last very long. I didn't really like that all that much. And then I ended up in information technology, IT. I was developer for a bit, and then ended up in management roles and moved around. But where it really did help, entrepreneurship was what I wanted to do. Since a little kid, I wanted to own my own soccer store, and I ended up owning my own business, a kayak shop, for about 11 years before we sold that. We also merged a couple companies, and we failed miserably at one of those mergers. But yeah, for sure, it helped understanding, what is a business plan and whatnot that you learn in entrepreneurship programs. You're also sort of exposed to every bit of the business, or you realize you have to know everything. You have to know how to read a P&L. You got to know what a marketing plan looks like, what the operations of a business means, and all that.
You have had a pretty impressive career across several different organizations, including the kayak company that you founded and then were able to sell. Talk to us about how the opportunity at SearchSpring came about and sort of your maybe like rise within the e-commerce world itself.
Yeah, I'll start at the back of that question. Is I got into e-commerce in 1999, technically, with Home Depot. I was helping build HomeDepot.com in the .com race to get a website up as fast as possible. And then in the kayak company in 2005, we launched our website. That was my first direct e-commerce experience. So I've been in e-commerce over 20 years, if you look at it that way. But that led me into SearchSpring via path of when we sold the kayak company to private equity, and I merged it with another company. That was the failed merge. And then left a year into that. I went to e-commerce technology, because that's what I really liked. I liked e-commerce, but I loved technology. So if I could do the two together, that was perfect. That was not SearchSpring. It was a different company. And I actually left there and was introduced to one of the general partners at ScaleWorks, which is the fund that owns us right now. And just an introductory, like, meet and greet. Hey, you should know these two people. You two people should know each other. And they're like, hey, yeah, we're working on this deal we might be doing. It turned out to be SearchSpring. And I was like, wow, you guys know that's what I've been doing and what I love. And so it really was a pretty much perfect timing. They didn't set out to seek me, and I didn't even know that SearchSpring was a thing. Had never heard of them, actually. So yeah, it was a happenstance.
Yeah. Well, let's use that now to get into the main topic for today, which is leading a team through a merger. Now, oftentimes at companies, when a CEO is brought in, especially when there's a board running the show, there is a specific reason that they want to bring in that CEO, because they're like, hey, this is the next set of goals for the company, and we believe that this person is best to help us accomplish those goals. What were those like? So take us back to those conversations. What did they say? Peter's the right person because we're trying to accomplish X.
Yeah, so I think what impressed them was I'd scaled a business from basically 0 to 30 million. And it's really, really difficult to scale as you get to like 0 to 5 is pretty easy, maybe even 0 to 8. But then it gets difficult. And what gets difficult is you're adding more people to the mix, and more. You have to be better at so many more things. So you can't focus and be good at like one little thing and be successful. It's across everything. But it is really the people component that makes it the toughest. If I take SearchSpring, when we acquired that, it was about 35 people. We added Nextopia, about 35 people, and we're at about 115 now. So we've added, a net result of, I don't know what that comes up to, 45 people. That's the hardest thing, is hiring good people. And then you get the watered down effect, like telephone game. So if I say I want X, does X, Y, or Z get produced at the end? It's really hard. When you're small, it's easy. But when you're bigger, it's, you tell somebody something, they tell somebody something. And then you go to make pasta, instead you get pudding, type of thing. Pasta pudding, of course, it'd be pasta pudding. But I think that's what impressed them, was that I scaled, or figured out at least how to scale to, there was 200 and something people, 30 million. Yeah.
So SearchSpring acquires Nextopia, and you start at SearchSpring in the spring of 2019. SearchSpring acquires Nextopia, about a year, maybe less than a year into when you are at the helm. How did that conversation even come about in the first place, especially when you were going head to head with Nextopia to win customers for so long? How did this idea of, well, maybe we should just become one company, even formulate in the first place?
Yeah, so it was actually much shorter than that. So the SearchSpring was right at the end of April, I think the last day of April. And the Nextopia was July 15th, I think, was the close date. So it was really short. We didn't go seek it. They actually sought Scaleworks. Scaleworks purchased SearchSpring, and they came and said, "Hey, we're for sale. Do you want to buy us?" So we acted really fast. That was not the preferred method. It'd rather be the other way around. But timing, we didn't get to dictate timing on that particular.
Other way around, meaning you go to them and say, "We want to buy you"?
Yeah, and be a little bit more in control of timing versus that quick. Because we didn't really know that much about SearchSpring at that time. We were just like, due diligence period, and then 2 months into operating.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so walk us through when you have a competitor who's like, "Well, we're for sale, we want to buy," or we want to get bought out, and then you have this opportunity to buy their company. Again, they're a competitor. So what level, because there's always, I say this because there's always a chance that the deal doesn't go through, right? But in this process, like, everyone's learning the other's financials, or at least you're learning all about their financials. So knowing that there's always that possibility that the deal might not go through, is there anything that either side is having to hold back in the process? Anything around like, if this doesn't happen, then, you're not allowed to do this for X many months, or anything around that to like protect one side or the other?
Yeah, we didn't have anything in there that would be wise to stick, some anti-competitive, pills in there if one walks, or penalties. I think these are fairly relatively small, so you're not going to see poison pills and stuff like that get injected into these processes. But you are right, it is dangerous for, in this case, it was for Nextopia, because we got to see all their information. We got to know everything they were doing. We got to see customer lists. I assume inside of I'd have to go back and look. I assume inside the NDA, we probably were not allowed to actually go call those customers directly. So there was probably some protections put in place on at least their current customers. But yeah, we could learn everything about their process, what they do, their go-to-market strategy, how much they're spending on marketing, where they're spending it, and turn around and say, we're not interested, and then rejig our efforts. That'd be kind of shitty of somebody, but I wouldn't do that. Not on purpose, not going in on purpose. If the deal fell apart, then yeah, I guess I have that information.
When you're looking at the balance sheet and just the overall assets of the company, what are some of the primary factors you're looking at? And I'm sure it's going to be not just like revenue, but what's your actual profitability and things like that. But I assume there can be cases where companies have a high revenue, maybe a decent profitability, but then there's some red flag. Maybe they own some asset that's just like hemorrhaging money out of the company. So what are some of those top things you would say went into your consideration to say this is a really good purchase for us?
Yeah, it can vary depending on industry as to what you're going to look at. In the SaaS industry, yeah, you're looking at growth rates, you're looking at churn. Excuse me. You're looking at growth rate, you're looking at churn, you're looking at the expansion or overall net retention revenue, NRR, which is your churn minus your expansion over the entire base. You want that to be a positive number, or over 100%. But you're also evaluating, is it a viable business? Are they actually collecting cash? Is the cash in the bank? Can you trace it back? What are the subscriptions? It's very dangerous on annual subscriptions because you don't know, are they renewing? Monthlies are easy because they're paying every single month. So you kind of know that customer's vested, is paying every month. So they have a reminder every month, but the annuals you worry about, that's comes down, that on the balance sheet's deferred revenue. So all that is deferred revenues. The higher the deferred revenue, the higher the risk of the business. You don't want a lot of deferred revenue because you just don't know that will continue forward. And then the most important part when you're evaluating is people side of things. Does it have the people to run it? What are you gonna have to do if it doesn't? Those are probably the biggest things we looked at.
Let's transition then and talk about the people side of it and the leadership aspect of it. But before we do, I just want to talk to our listeners for a moment and kind of ask them, have you ever found yourself in a situation where Google Analytics just isn't providing what you need from it? I know I'm in that camp where I'm constantly finding myself in situations where the back end of my site, I'm looking at GA and I'm like, well, I don't know, these numbers don't look like they're accurate. Something's missing here. And then when it comes to understanding where and why I lose site visitors, that's like, it's hard to straight up impossible. Because with GA, there's always some type of integration issue, or I got to sort through a mountain of data just to figure out what's causing leads to drop off. It's a kind of a living nightmare in many cases. And that's why I was super excited to learn of a better way to measure website analytics. And that's Oribi. Oribi is a unique marketing analytics tool that captures all the events visitors perform on your website without using code. Oribi enables you to analyze visitor behavior patterns, build smart funnels as a result, and then get tons of insights so you always know what your next step is. So finally, you can understand your visitors and know what to change in order to convert more, which means no more blind spots on your site. To start your free trial, visit oribi.io/today. That's oribi.io/today. And I'm very excited to have them as a partner of the show this season. And they've been awesome. And they've got a coupon code for all of you. Use coupon code HYPEMAN at checkout, HYPEMAN, for 20% off at checkout. And again, the link is Oribi, ORIBI.io/today. Use promo code HYPEMAN for 20% off at checkout. Today, I'm with Peter Mesana, the CEO of SearchSpring, and we're talking about how to lead a team through a merger. So before the break there, Peter talked about the people aspect of it. And I want to learn a little bit more now. When the deal was finalized, what was the messaging strategy to the respective companies? Were you the one who sent an email to the Nextopia side, or the Nextopia CEO send to their side? How did you think through, here's how we're going to tell our companies what's going on?
Yeah, so this was a little bit different than, each merger will be different, but we chose that at the time before telling either set of employees that we were going to run these independent. As mentioned earlier, we were only 2.5 months into running SearchSpring. We hadn't really decided on who the actual output company was going to be. Was SearchSpring going to be the go forward? Was Nextopia going to be the go forward? So we kind of treated these like we bought two independent companies, and we'd run them mostly independent. So the messaging changed because of that slightly than what you would normally do. I messaged internally to the SearchSpring that this acquisition was happening, that we were not merging the two together right away. We were going to spend some time to evaluate. And then on the other side, the CEO did the announcement, the outgoing CEO did the announcement to his company in person. We were all in person in 2019 still. So it worked out a little easier. They're in Toronto, and I'd flown up there the day he announced it to them. I had met with his current leadership team outside the office the morning before the announcement so that I could meet and greet. Then we did the announcement, and as you do with anything to make friends, you have a happy hour afterwards. So, and answer a bunch of questions.
You brought bagels when you walked in that morning.
Well, we did the announcement in the afternoon so we could have.
Okay, can you now explain? You do this trial period for several months. How do you decide SearchSpring is going to be the prevailing brand here, and we're going to sunset the Nextopia name and brand?
Yeah, we probably only made it to like 2 months before we'd internally decided what we were doing. Most of that decision came down to which team is at a greater risk if they leave based on our decisions. So once we had decided that the SearchSpring tech stack was going to be the go forward, then that team is now the most important team. So by choosing the SearchSpring brand in this case, they feel like they've made the acquisition. They're a little happier about it. Alternative is to go with a new brand. We could have just gone a completely new brand, called it Nextspring, or SearchTopia or some corny name, and try to make everybody happy. But we did also feel that the SearchSpring brand had a bit better brand appeal in the market. Though I argued Nextopia was a nebulous term, and nebulous terms opens up the market bigger. SearchSpring is telling you it's search, and we're more than just search. That is our primary, but yeah, no, that's how it went in. That was the basis. The second part was that their employment reviews on Glassdoor weren't very good at Nextopia, and if you're trying to hire a bunch of people, that was going to be a red flag. So if you're trying to scale a bunch of people, that's not going to help you. You can overcome those. Glassdoor is kind of a disaster in and of itself, but there's a lot of games being played on highly positives. So there's always a bit of a dilemma, but that was a secondary.
But the outsider doesn't know that, right? Like they're not looking at that saying, "Oh, this is gamed."
No, you wish they knew, but wow, that company has a negative review followed by a positive review every time. That's not weird.
Okay, so you look at the tech stack, you look at which team is most likely to leave, and like that would hurt us if we make this decision. You look at the overall brand equity, and then you also factor in employee reviews. Is there anything else in that lineup that you're looking at to say, well, we need to consider this part as well?
Not really when we were just choosing the brand from the external facing. No, that was pretty much what we thought about. I mean, there were other things that had to go into play on the backside, like, which team's better at X, and do we use their process or the other one's process? But choosing the brand is sort of agnostic to, like, are you going to use Salesforce or are you going to use HubSpot, which those decisions we had to make because we were split between them. Those are all operational, back-end operational tactics that didn't matter the logo or the colors.
Yeah. Oftentimes when there's a merger or an acquisition, you have some backlash from either the company who's doing the acquiring, but also you could have a backlash from the other side from who got acquired or whose brand got sunsetted. Did that happen in this case? Was there any backlash, like any nasty emails that were sent to you, anything like that?
No, because I think the way we approached it by running them independent and buying some time, I think that probably took that away, because if I back up to the earlier acquisition that I said was a failed one, It's where we mashed two equals together, and the acquiring company actually ended up with me as the CEO. And then there was massive backlash, like, why are we doing it your way? We don't want to do it your way. We didn't have that here because it was each are running independent. So they each continue to do it their way. Now we did get the backlash when we finally internally said, this is what we're doing. We're only going to sell one product. We're only going to sell one way. But I think because we bought enough, time, it wasn't like a knee jerk at the time of acquisition, and they understood and they saw the success those things were having. I think that minimized the backlash. I'm not saying that this is the right way to go about an acquisition. What we did was due to timing. I would have much rather have loved to have done it all at the time of close, to be honest.
Why is that?
Yeah, because you left people in a limbo state and uncertainty, a little jockeying going on that doesn't need to happen. I think probably a bigger bang in the market too, if at the time it was, here it is, selfishly, because that would have been in August of 2019 and not announced in February 15th of 2020 for a pandemic to destroy all conferences. That was supposed to be all the announcements and all the rage. So I think that hindsight's 2020 on that one.
Quick sidebar question. Is it really a branding play to decide whether it's going to be outwardly labeled as a merger versus an acquisition, or is there something in the financials that dictates what it has to be called?
Nah, I think it doesn't matter. I mean, you usually are saying merger if it's like you're merging equals, acquisition if you're acquiring smaller. That's usually at least how I interpret those labels when I see them. So yeah, that's why we merged two, and they were the exact same products. So we ended up going on and acquiring Fortel last July, and that to me is a full acquisition. We bought it. We had fully rolling it in. There was no merging of the two from an external standpoint.
Sure. Now, when you have a big event like this, I think it really is a chance to hit the reset button, on both companies. Do you view it as that? And if so, how do you feel you went about resetting company expectations from that point forward?
Yeah, you definitely hit the reset because everything's from that day that you blast. I called it the one t-shirt, one team, one product. Like from that day forward, you're all now beating to the one drum. And it gave us the chance to change things at SearchSpring, even though we were selling SearchSpring as the product. It gave us a chance. We changed the sales processes. We changed the backend operations. So it gives you the opportunity, and you can do that anytime you want, but this is just a great way or great timing for like, this is what we're going to change. We're going to change our marketing messaging. So we changed all of our marketing messaging around. So it gave a nice project that everybody could shoot for, like, this one day. We want all this stuff done.
I'll tell you, in my own employee experience years ago when I worked at a company, yes, there was a point in time where I worked at a company. I was there, and I think on my second week, we acquired a data company. And then during my time, we acquired, I think, 3 more companies, and they were all smaller than we were. And then ultimately, my last year there, a private equity group acquired, the entire thing. Each time, I remember when new employees came in, there was like initial excitement and like a desire to like, let's welcome them into the family, that kind of thing. But at the same time, there was this like, wait, you mean you don't have like this set up? Like, how did y'all even operate? That kind of thing. What do you feel was the sort of like sentiment from one side to the other in terms of, welcoming them in and being able to really execute on that whole, one t-shirt, one team, one goal?
Yeah, I think with the Nextopia, it was interesting because a lot of them knew each other. Both companies have been around a long time. They see each other at trade shows. So there was some common ground already established. There definitely was a lot of, why do you do it that way? What? You crazy? What? You guys are nuts. No wonder you couldn't outsell us. That was always the best one. No wonder why we beat you. That was both sides. They were actually almost winning 50-50 when they went head to head. And a third of the leads were common or shared across the two. So, but yeah, I think that was probably it. And if I look at, so it wasn't like open arms, and I don't think it was the same feeling for it. Because if I look at the Fortel acquisition last year, which we acquired and also acquired with that, they were only like 7 employees, they were much smaller. But that was a huge welcome to the family. Now they've asked a lot of things like, you do what? When you're a really small company, your processes are somewhat honed in, and maybe arguably better than as you get bigger and you have bureaucracy and layers and things that happen. So. But yeah, I saw 2 different ways there.
When you essentially then double in size as a company, you mentioned earlier, well, now the decision-making process kind of changes, but from a CEO perspective, are there things that you intentionally start doing differently as a leader that maybe, when you're a smaller company, perhaps there's things you don't even think twice about, or perhaps there are processes that you don't have in place. So what's the difference then when your team doubles in size pretty much overnight?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that is different. One is I brought in an entire leadership team that was mostly external, people I worked with in the past, people I hadn't. So that to the employees is a big change, because suddenly, very flat organizations. They were both very flat organizations. So the CEO had 10 people reporting on each side. Well, I wasn't going to have 20. That'd kill me. So I needed layers, and I think the layers is the big change. Because then with that comes structure. It also comes opportunity, because now you're building layers and you have a place for people to get promoted to, and large affords that, which is large, and growth affords growth of individuals. But yeah, that's probably the big, and trying to put structure in place, trying to have more structured meetings, as you grow, process and communication are the 2 toughest things. So yeah, doubling overnight, 2 different countries, one's in Toronto, one's in Denver. So yeah, you're trying to work a solid communication structure. I think communication was probably what we focused on most.
Did you find then your hours worked per week jumped as a result?
I don't know, not per se. I did have the luxury of that. I just did bring in an entire management team that was either just before the merger or just after. So I did get to delegate off a bunch. I work a ton. That's why I chuckled, because I don't know if I could add more work to my days without probably being killed by my family.
My final question here before we begin our wrap up. There is always going to be some level of employee attrition with a merger or an acquisition. Some people are like, peace, I'm out. This is not what I signed up for, or this is a good chance for me to go leave and do something else. And there are also people who are like, I'm all on board with this. And then I think there's a middle ground of people who are like, let's see how this plays out. For the employees who stay, how long do you kind of like mentally give them to like get on board with the new vision, the new direction, before you actually have to have a conversation with them about letting them go?
Yeah, one good thing we had going for us is we were growing pretty fast at the time. We're accelerating growth at the time, and grew fast post both. So we weren't in a cost savings, like let's acquire and figure out, the overlap and start removing people just due to redundancy. We didn't have a lot of redundancy. So we weren't in a position as a company that, post acquisition, we're going to cut 10 jobs or at acquisition for that matter. We weren't in that sort of position. So we knew we had enough seats around the table to fit everybody from the team. So it did come down to, who's on board with what we're going and the path we're going. People do self-select out. They leave. I think since we did formally end up merging them together and just before the pandemic, we probably have some muted statistics because I don't think people were willing to leave in 2020. Our turnover rate in 2020 was like 10% or something tiny. So I'm not sure I have a real picture as to what with the regular attrition, not the forced attrition. But yeah, you give somebody as long as it takes before you're, basically at the end of the rope of like, you're not getting on board. You need to find something else. Is there a different job in the company? Is there a different, or do you just need to move on? I'm pretty self-aware, or tried to be, that people need to leave for a reason, and it's actually could be positive for them and positive for us. And like to rather than be surprised, actually just posted this last week. Yeah, nobody should ever be surprised when somebody leaves, because you should have had conversations that you knew that they weren't happy, and they should feel that they can express that. So as long as you're having those open conversations, it's pretty easy to tell somebody this. I mean, there's one particular employer I know I spoke with, and I said it's not going to be what it used to. I can't make it do that anymore. It's just that ship's gone. If that's what you really need, then this isn't it. And they moved on. In a month or two later on their own. The same thing happens though with growing companies, to be honest. As the company grows, you're not part of all the decisions. You're not in the know. You feel like you used to do that job as part of your job. Now somebody's hired to do it, and your job is now a slice of the pie and not the whole pie, or maybe it's a third of the pie instead of 2/3 of the pie. And the same thing happens with those individuals that does with a merger. It's does the company outgrow you? Or do you outgrow the company? I guess those are two reasons why you leave a company, or one of two reasons why you leave, or two of some reasons why you leave. But I think I answered your question.
Let's go ahead and begin our wrap up. Where can our listeners get in touch with you, Peter, and also learn more about you and SearchSpring?
I mean, the obvious place would be just email me at SearchSpring, peter@searchspring.com. Sign up for my blog on the website. It's a great place. I write a weekly blog. I write about all random topics, e-commerce, leadership, whatever's on my mind. They are written by me. Marketing's allowed to fix misspellings. They're not allowed to add They're not allowed to add commas. They're not allowed to stop run-on sentences. And then on LinkedIn as well. P Messana on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and the hashtag CEO Peter that you've been hyping up for quite a while now.
Yeah, I learned it from that I should hype things up from the hype man.
Peter, who's one person who you want to shout out? This could be a coworker, a mentor, an advisor, a friend, a colleague.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably go. My default would be my father. He was my mentor growing up. He really helped me when I had the first business and taught me a ton. Unfortunately, passed away 10 years ago next week. But he definitely was the one that could steer me straight. I've been zigzagging a bit over 10 years, I guess.
Let's do our final takeaways now. So our topic today was leading a team through a merger. I'll go first, then I'll toss it over to you. I think one of the biggest things I pulled out of this conversation was when you're making the decision of what company should prevail, or should this actually happen. You mentioned, which team is at greater risk if the decision we make means we lose them, and that team is valuable. And some of those things you mentioned that go into that is the tech stack, the brand equity, the employee reviews, right? Which of those is at greater, is the company at greater risk if we don't consider those things? So I think that was really huge for me. Peter, on your side, what are your top one or two lessons or takeaways for the audience?
It's really, really difficult. And to expect the unexpected, even where you think that a person or a team that it's a benefit or a positive, you'll be surprised. Somebody's going to zig while you're zagging, and you're going to get caught in a sort of a crisscross. So nothing goes to plan.
My final question, which is how we end every episode on this show. Fill in the blank, Peter. Entrepreneurship is blank.
Fucking difficult.
Say more on that.
It's just really tough. When you have your own, it's all you. If it's true entrepreneurship and you're the sole owner, you're making all the decisions. You're building something that's never been done before, potentially, or you're building something and you want to do it your way. It just takes a lot of hard work, and to persevere on the other side, it's just really, really hard. I'm always asked, because I did own my own and I sold it, and entrepreneurship, like, would you do it again? And frankly, I don't know if I would right now start something. I feel like I don't have the energy, because you have to have that energy and that passion. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I could, 80, 90 hours a week of going. I'm not sure. I also don't have a great idea. So if somebody has a great idea, maybe tell me and I'll go run with their great idea. But you can find me at peter@searchspring.com with that great idea. That'd be awesome. Actually, probably shouldn't send it to my work one, so I shouldn't be moonlighting here. But SearchSpring can launch your great idea. There we go.
He is Peter Messana, the CEO of SearchSpring, kicking off a brand new season of Startup Hypeman, the podcast. And again, all this season, we're featuring different clients in the Startup Hypeman portfolio. Peter, it's been a pleasure to work alongside you for the last 1+ year, and I look forward to more. Thank you for being a guest today, kicking off our new season on Startup Hypeman, the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. And, you and Startup Hypeman has really helped us, so I appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
That does it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a rating and review in your podcast app, or do us one better. Hit the share button. Send this episode to one friend who you think needs to hear it. While you're on your way out, don't forget to follow Startup Hypeman on Instagram and LinkedIn at Startup Hypeman. And remember, you can also connect with today's guest as well. They left their contact info. They love hearing if what they shared helped you in any way. StartupHypeman.com is the place to catch the full 17-season archive and learn all about how to pitch your startup. We'll see you next week, but until then, stay hyped. Raj Nation out.